Chapter 6. From between the bars of the spider's cage, Will saw his friend appear through the trees. He had never been so pleased to see anyone in his life. "Rhea! Help!" he said. "I'm trapped!" Rhea skidded to a halt. Her mouth dropped open as she saw the giant metal monster. "Get me out of here! Please!" urged Will. Rhea's eyes darted around the scene, taking in the details. She called out, "And what exactly can I do about this situation?" The Void Leader glared at Rhea and hissed. It raised its fangs and squirted 2 streams of glossy grey tar in her direction. Rhea leapt out of the way nimbly. I can't get any closer," she said. Will felt dizzy and with fear and frustration. He held the bars of his cage and rested his forehead against the cooling metal, trying to think. A memory stirred in his mind. His forehead. Something about his forehead. Will thrust his hands into his coat pocket. His fingers touched something round. Suddenly, Sam's words came back to him. The orb was powerful and special. But what had Sam told him to do with it? "Put it against your forehead," he thought. That was it. Will took the orb in both hands and lifted it to his forehead. He pressed it gently against his skin. Immediately, there was a change inside the orb. The cloudy greyness inside burst into a rainbow of colours. Will suddenly felt strangely calm. The jumble of worries in his head melted away. He looked up. The void was still at work. It was scuttling over his cage, strengthening the dome with more and more cables. But somehow, Will wasn't panicked anymore. It was almost as if it were happening to someone else. Fragments of a picture, like pieces of a jigsaw, began to float around his mind. To his astonishment, the fragments began to join together and take shape inside the orb. A shape emerged within the swirling colours. To Will's surprise, it was a small plastic pot with a strange plant in it. He recognized it immediately. The image inside the sphere was his own Venus flytrap. The picture of the plant dissolved and Will lowered the orb. He felt a surge of confidence. The orb had given him an idea. Will called out to his friend, "Rhea, can you see those big flowers up there?" Rhea looked up into the branches and grimaced. "Uh-huh. Wow, they look nasty," she said. "Like one of your weird plants." Will nodded vigorously. Yes, like my Venus flytrap." "Or a spider trap," Rhea exclaimed. "Don't worry, I get what you're thinking." She clenched her jaw and leapt into a nearby newspaper tree. The white bark immediately curled aside to reveal the words, "Oi, get off!" Will watched with nervous admiration as Rhea climbed gracefully higher into the tree. When she reached the thick branch near the top of the tree, she stood upright and stepped out along it. The branch bent under her weight, but she kept her nerve. She placed one foot in front of the other, like a cat on a garden fence. Will found himself holding his breath. High above him, Rhea had reached one of the enormous drooping flowers. It had hinged jaws lined with long spikes. The flower hung from a single, towering stem. Rhea took a deep breath and leapt from the end of the branch across the thin air to the flower. She wrapped her arms and clamped her legs around the top of it. Immediately, the thick stem began to bend under her extra weight. Rhea and the flower plunged down toward the void. On top of Will's cage, the void looked up just in time to see the giant flower swooping down towards it. Its red eye flashed in alarm, and it tried to scuttle away. The spikes on the flower brushed the void's metal back, and the flower snapped shut just around the void's body. The void hissed and gnashed its fangs. The bent stem creaked like the string of a bow, desperate to spring back into its natural shape. Rhea grinned down at Will. "Give me a countdown then," she said. 3, 2, 1, shouted Will enthusiastically. Rhea released the grip. Like that. And leapt aside to the ground. Like a catapult, the huge flower stem pinged back up with incredible speed. The void was whipped into the air at the top of the swing. The flower's jaw opened, and the void was thrown free. It hissed and squealed as it was launched up through the canopy. Will and Rhea watched as its flashing red eye disappeared across the treetops. Will rushed over to Will. "That was amazing," she exclaimed. Rhea shrugged her shoulders casually. "It was your idea," she replied. Will grabbed 2 of the bars of the cage. Now the void had gone, he was suddenly struck by the close confines of his prison. Panic began to rise again in his chest, to his throat. "I've got to get out of here," he pleaded hoarsely. Rhea joined him and gripped the bars from the outside. "The metal, it's still warm," she said. "We might be able to pull these bars apart." They pulled, trying to bend the cooling metal. However, they only managed to prise the bars apart a few inches before Will felt the strength going from his arms. "It's no good," he said forlornly. "We've got to work together," urged Rhea. "Don't give up. Pull at the same time." Will gritted his teeth, and he and Rhea strained at the bars until their arms and shoulders ached. Slowly but surely they made a narrow hole between the 2 bars. Will sized it up. He felt a rush of excitement. It would be a tight fit, but... "I think I can get out," he said breathlessly. He passed his cap through the hole to Rhea and stuck his head through. Next, he squeezed his shoulders through the gap and began to worm the rest of his body through. Rhea grabbed the collar of his coat and pulled. "You can do it, Will," she encouraged him. For a horrible moment, Will thought he was stuck as his hips caught on the bars. He wriggled and twisted, and suddenly he was free. He tumbled out of the cage and flopped onto the ground. He heaved a sigh of relief. "Thank you," he said, grinning up at Rhea. At that moment, Sam burst through the trees. "Night Zookeeper, where are you?" said the giraffe. He spotted Will and then Rhea. "Oh, who are you? Did I miss something?" Will stared up at Sam from the ground. "Kinda, Sam. This is my friend, Rhea." Sam noticed the metal cage. "The void! What happened?" "It's all right. Rhea catapulted it across the forest. You should have seen it." "Thank you, Rhea. You saved the night zookeeper," said Sam. His long blue tongue flopped out of his mouth. "Whoa, what are you doing?" asked Rhea. She realized too late. Sam slurped his tongue up her face. Dribble glistened in her hair. Rhea screwed up her face. "Are you serious?" she exclaimed, and Will chuckled. Sam grinned. "The void. Which way did it go?" he asked. Will got to his feet gingerly. "I'm not sure. That way, I think," he said. Sam's eyes widened. "You mean back towards the camp?" "Oh," said Will. "Well, we didn't really have time to aim." "We've got to go," urged Sam. "You need to save the others." "Hang on a sec," said Will, and looked around quickly. "There you are," he added, and picked up the torch. Will, Rhea and Sam set off back towards the giraffe camp as quickly and quietly as possible. Several night butterflies circled them, lighting the way. "I thought I was imagining it when I saw you," Will told Rhea. "How did you get here?" "I saw you in the alley behind my house. I followed you through those glowing gates," explained Rhea. Will filled Rhea in on everything that had happened so far. "By the way, it worked, Sam," said Will. "The orb. I didn't know what to do, but then I saw my Venus flytrap inside it. It made me think about trapping the void." "I told you it was special," said Sam. "Look, I think we're nearly there. There's the wall." "Shh!" Sam blew a couple of the times to the night butterflies, and they disappeared into the treetops. Will and Rhea crouched low to the ground as they approached the rocky wall. Behind them, Sam lowered his neck and head to their level and tried to tiptoe on his hooves. He lost his balance for a moment and banged his snout into Rhea's shoulder. She gave him an exasperated look. "Aren't you a bit, tall to be a spy?" she hissed. And clumsy." Will was peeking over the top of the rocks. "That's not good," he muttered. Rhea and Sam joined him. In the clearing, all of the giraffes were trapped under a giant metal cage. The voids were patrolling the perimeter. Will heard Necker's voice. "Let us go! We will not give in to Nolf." The voids all stopped moving and began to gnash their fangs in a frenzy. Clicker-clacker, clicker-clacker. Will spotted the void leader, and the one they had defeated before. It had found its way back to the camp. Will was pleased to see that there was a dent in its metal, and one of its fangs had been snapped off. It clambered up the outside of the cage and hissed and swiped at Necker. Sticky tar spurted from its fang onto the giraffes below, who jostled and pushed each other in panic. "We have to rescue them," said Will. "Yes, but how? We're outnumbered," said Rhea. And that cage will be so cold. I don't know, but we've got to try, he insisted. Oh, I've had a great idea, said Sam. Great, said Will. Will and Rhea both looked at the giraffe expectantly for several seconds. Well, they both said. Oh, sorry, yes. I don't think I've mentioned this before. Or perhaps I have. I can't remember, said Sam. What? Mentioned what? Did I mention that I can turn myself invisible? Will and Rhea exchanged looks of surprise. No, Sam, you didn't, said Will. Are you sure? Asked Sam. I must have told you. I am a spy, after all. I think I would have remembered, replied Will. Whatever, guys, interrupted Rhea. What's the plan then, Sam? And that's chapter 6.